Today, the joy of touring will take you on a trip through the American West, an area of vast wild landscapes that will bring John Wayne to mind, as well as the fierce and brave Geronimo. But the Wild West is no longer the sole domain of cowboys and Indians. The West has entered the 21st century, and while it has a rich history, it is also one of the most modern, cutting-edge places on the planet. Just think of the flashing lights of Hollywood and Las Vegas. It's easy to see that what was once thought to be El Dorado has turned into a highly coveted vacation spot that has something to interest everyone. Our itinerary will take us to three of the largest states on the West Coast: California, Nevada, and Arizona. On the way, we'll visit the region's most fascinating attractions, including Death Valley, the Grand Canyon, Las Vegas, and of course, Hollywood. For some, the Southwest is a symbol of showbiz. For others, it's about cowboys and Indians. Whatever interests you, come along and join us on our all-inclusive tour through the Southwestern United States on the joy of touring. Upon arriving on American soil, we immediately jump onto our bus to begin our exploration. Our first stop will be Los Angeles, the second most populous city in the U.S. after New York. Today, the city is a magnet, attracting people from all over the country and the world, with a population of over 10 million. One thing the city is famous for is its thousands of kilometers of road. Our initiation to the City of Angels starts with the compulsory drive through the city's winding system of freeways. Fortunately, lanes reserved for high-occupancy vehicles allow us to move smoothly through the freeway. We soon arrive in the city's historical district. Los Angeles started off as a small village made up of 44 families of Spanish colonists who founded El Pueblo de la Reina de Los Angeles sobre el Río de la Porciuncula, the town of Our Lady Queen of the Angels on the Porciuncula River. In less than 2 centuries, that village of a few hundred has become a bustling megacity. In the old plaza of the historic district, statues of King Carlos III of Spain and of Felipe de Neve, first governor of the Californias, remind us of the area's Spanish roots that are still visibly strong. In the surrounding area, we can visit various historical sites, including the Nuestra Señora Reina Mission, founded at the same time as the city by Spanish Franciscan monks, and also have a look at the oldest house in the city, called Avila Adobe. Built in 1818 by Don Francisco Avila, who was then mayor of LA, the house has been maintained as close to the original as possible in order to give us an idea of the living conditions in California at that time. The house sustained severe damage from an earthquake in 1971. Fortunately for us, it has been completely restored. Our next stop in LA is less than 2 kilometers away from the historic district. The Los Angeles Music Center is a complex composed of several buildings dedicated to music. First, we'll check out the Walt Disney Concert Hall, home to the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra. Designed by Frank Gehry, the hall is an ultra-modern avant-garde structure featuring curved external walls clad in stainless steel. Inside, the auditorium is renowned for having perfect acoustics. Since its inauguration in 1999, this magnificent cultural complex has hosted concerts by the biggest names in music of all different genres. Right next to the Walt Disney Concert Hall, we find the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. It's where the Los Angeles Opera performs under its director, none other than the legendary Placido Domingo. Let's get back on the bus, and we'll take the Santa Monica Freeway towards Beverly Hills. This celebrated neighborhood is one of California's stargazing meccas. This is the natural habitat of the gods and goddesses of the screen. Of course, it's impossible to visit the luxurious homes of the celebrities, but there's nothing stopping us from having a look around. Made famous in the movie Pretty Woman, Rodeo Drive is one of the most expensive shopping streets in the world. Luxury boutiques, designer clothes, jewelry, art galleries, everything around here points to affluence. It's a good idea to have your camera at the ready when walking up Rodeo Drive. With a little luck, we'll spot at least a few movie stars doing some shopping. Now let's set our course for the famed Sunset Boulevard, which stretches from the city center all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Hollywood, here we come, a name that embodies the California dream. Since the early 1900s, Hollywood has been the hub of the American movie machine, drawing crowds of star seekers and hopeful actors and fascinating the whole world. On Hollywood Boulevard, movies are king. Its most famous institutions are Grauman's Chinese Theater and the Dolby Theater, formerly known as the Kodak Theater. These are where the major Hollywood pictures premiere and where the Oscars are given out every year. Whether they win one of the coveted little gold statues or not, many actors can take comfort in another popular mark of recognition, a star on the Walk of Fame. Over the past 50 years, these stars have been awarded by the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce to celebrities of the entertainment industry who have contributed to the development of their art. Today, the famous sidewalk includes over 2,500 stars shining in the firmament of glory and tens of thousands who dream of being added. We'll wind down our day in the City of Angels at our hotel, the Hacienda. Located close to the Pacific Ocean, we're sure to have a good night's sleep here before continuing our tour of the American West. Another beautiful day rises on the west coast of the United States. We'll start our day with a visit to two spots that are extremely popular among sun seekers, Santa Monica and Venice Beach. Surrounded by the vast, sprawling city of LA, these two small municipalities are located right next to each other on the Pacific coast and have magnificent beaches, lapped by the waves of Santa Monica Bay. It's only a short drive from our hotel to Santa Monica. On arrival, we're immediately confronted with a postcard-perfect scene, magnificent beaches, towering palm trees, and surfers riding the waves. What more could you ask for? But the undisputed star of this beach is the celebrated Santa Monica Pier, an immense dock that stretches far into the Pacific Ocean. Built at the beginning of the 20th century, the pier is home to Pacific Park, an amusement park with an enormous Ferris wheel, carnival rides, shops, and even a trapeze school. This pier is a symbolic spot for many Americans. Not only does it mark the end of the celebrated Route 66, it also features prominently in pop culture, turning up frequently in films, videos, and TV series. The wooden structure and amusement park were set locations for Titanic and South Park, as well as the incomparable Forrest Gump, winner of 6 Academy Awards. The Robert Zemeckis film has left its mark here on the pier in Santa Monica. We're lucky the pier is still here. It was almost demolished in the 1970s due to deterioration caused over time by storms rolling in from the Pacific. Rebuilt and totally renovated during the 80s, it is now considered by the U.S. government to be a historic landmark and receives over 3 million visitors every year. Just a few minutes walk, or an even shorter ride on the bike path, takes us to the legendary Venice Beach. The city has a motto that describes it perfectly: another day in paradise. This is a land of liberty and free expression. A perfect place for people watching and exploring the charming shops that line the beachfront. The 4-kilometer stretch of oceanfront at Venice Beach is reserved for pedestrians. It's a constant party, 24 hours a day. Venice, California is also known as the birthplace of the modern skateboard. California experienced a long drought during the late 1970s. The empty pools were transformed into skate parks for people looking to hone their skills on a skateboard. Over the next 30 years, the sport has developed into a real institution, and the skate parks attract crowds of skaters from all over the world. Like Santa Monica, Venice Beach is a famous film and TV set. That's right, this beach was the set for the cult 90s series Baywatch. After spending some time feeling the warm sand between our toes, we'll head back to the bus and get back on the road. Tonight, we'll stay in the town of Laughlin. Located where the Nevada, Arizona, and California borders meet, Laughlin is the halfway point between the coast and the Grand Canyon. In mere minutes, even as we merge onto the interstate, we observe a radical change in scenery. No more skyscrapers and traffic jams. In their place are the sweeping landscapes of the Mojave Desert, an arid region covering an area of 40,000 square kilometers. We take a pit stop at a roadside cafe and get a nice surprise. Newberry Springs is the desert town where the film Baghdad Cafe was shot in the mid-'80s. When the film was made, this establishment was called the Sidewinder Cafe. It was renamed in honor of the critically acclaimed movie. Almost nothing has changed since then. We'll continue our trip as the sun sets behind us over the Pacific Ocean. We arrive in Laughlin as night falls. We'll stay the night at the Avi Resort and Casino, a hotel complex that is typical of Nevada with its live country music and its VLTs. We're in one of the few states where gambling is completely legal, so let's make the most of it. The sun is rising over the small town of Laughlin in Nevada. After a generous breakfast, we're ready to get going. Just a few kilometers on the road, we cross the state line into Arizona. Our course is set for Grand Canyon National Park. The Grand Canyon is surely one of the most iconic locations in the United States, but the highway we drive on to get there is equally celebrated. That's right, we're rolling on Route 66. Route 66 has been sung and written about countless times and has become more than just a highway. It has become part of our collective imagination, a page out of the American history books. The first ever transcontinental highway, Route 66, was established in 1926 when the Department of Transportation united a system of existing roads into a single cross-country highway. It went into decline decades later with the construction of the U.S. interstate highway system. A few segments of the legendary highway remain today. Small towns like Seligman still champion the images of their glorious past. Filled with souvenir shops, antiques, and vintage cars, this region is steeped in nostalgia for an era in which America was a prosperous rising power. But people don't take themselves too seriously.
What's your specialty?
Chicken. Yeah, chicken, eh?
Everything seems to be just a little laid back. We get back on Route 66 on our way out of town. We haven't forgotten about our destination, Grand Canyon National Park. And let me tell you, we're pulling out all the stops, touring the Grand Canyon in style. We leave our bus behind to climb into a helicopter that will really let us take a good look at this incredible natural phenomenon. In just a few minutes, the Grand Canyon is in sight. The sheer enormity of the landscape is awe-inspiring. We are moved by this humbling display of nature's power. The Grand Canyon National Park covers an area of almost 5,000 square kilometers, making it 85 times larger than Manhattan Island in New York. Carved out of rock by the Colorado River, the canyon is 450 kilometers long, stretching from Lake Powell to Lake Mead. In places, it's 29 kilometers wide and almost 2 kilometers deep. The layers of rock at the bottom of the canyon were formed 1,080 million years ago, while the rock at the peaks was formed only 270 million years ago. But all these numbers mean nothing when you observe the sheer beauty and splendor of the place. It's an experience that can change your view of the world. Witnessing the gargantuan forces of nature and time makes us realize how small we really are. The story of the Grand Canyon began almost 2 billion years ago, and many more chapters will be written after we're gone, as long as the Earth exists. As the sun sets on these majestic landscapes, our driver brings us toward the town of Flagstaff, where we'll spend the night. We leave our hotel in Flagstaff early in the morning to get back on the road. Our destination, Monument Valley, located in the middle of Navajo country. Before European colonists settled in the United States, the Navajo lived on an immense stretch of land that encompassed Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. After numerous conflicts with the settlers, more than 8,000 Navajos were forcibly deported to New Mexico. Many years later, the tribe was able to reclaim part of their land, which had been designated reservation land. Since 1964, Monument Valley Navajo Tribal Park is under the Navajo jurisdiction. The landscapes of Monument Valley are some of the most iconic in the American West. This is the Wild West one imagines. Its red sandstone mesas and buttes have been photographed millions of times and appear in dozens of films, TV shows, and videos. It was here that John Wayne was filmed in the iconic 1939 movie Stagecoach. From that day on, Monument Valley has been the set location for many productions, including Once Upon a Time in the West and even 2001: A Space Odyssey. To get a better understanding of the land and to grasp the history of the park, nothing beats a tour by a Navajo guide. Our guide tells us the difference between the two types of rock rises, buttes and mesas. A butte is taller than it is wide, while a mesa is wider than it is tall.
À gauche, the éléphant. En face, à gauche, la butte des chameaux. The camel butte.
Each of these escarpments has a name, and you can tell that people really use their imaginations to dream up these ones.
À droite, les trois sœurs. And the submarine. Use your imagination.
Further down the road, we visit a hogan, a traditional Navajo house. Built of juniper and cedar branches covered with earth, these traditional houses provide shelter over the chilly winters. At the sight of the hogans, our guide bursts into a traditional song.
Maintenant, vous chantez.
In this unforgettable landscape, we are again confronted by the incredible power of nature, which sculpted these rocky peaks over millions of years. At the foot of a mesa, we have a break and stretch out our legs and try some of the local food.
Bon appétit.
After our meal, we'll leave Monument Valley with our heads full of the magnificent landscape and the feeling of having experienced something truly special. Next destination, Kanab. Following our encounter with the gracious Navajo in Monument Valley, now we're going to spend some time with the cowboys of Kanab. The town of Kanab is located around 4 hours away from the Navajo Reserve. The drive is a blessing, letting us catch up on our rest and daydream about the trip ahead. The day is coming to an end. When we arrive, we'll drop off our bags at Kanab's Shiloh Inn, where we'll spend the night and head to the Chuck Wagon Cookout for supper.
In order to make a Western movie, we needed a few actor, and we'd really like you to do that.
The restaurant specializes in the traditional food of the American West. But the thing that makes it famous is the surprise film set the restaurant has prepared for us. Choosing from a wide range of cowboy hats, Indian headdresses, and military caps, we're all invited to take part. We'll be recreating a scene in a movie under the direction of the friendly owner.
Take one, if all the West was lost, roll the sound.
Indians on one side, cowboys on the other, with a generous sprinkling of settlers and cavalry for extra flavor. The storyline may not always be crystal clear, but it's an excellent excuse to cut loose, and a great time is had by all.
Bravo, guys, bravo! Bravo!
After the customary cast photo, our evening continues around the table, which is laden with a well-deserved supper, complete with musical entertainment. Having a wild time in the Wild West. Another day dawns in the land of cowboys and Indians. Today, our journey will take us through beautiful countrysides, national parks, and hundreds of kilometers with some fascinating pit stops. By the day's end, we'll be kicking up our heels in the gambling capital of the world. Leaving Kanab, we'll head back into Arizona for a few kilometers before crossing into the state of Nevada, where we'll set our course straight for Las Vegas. Our noses are glued to the windows, our eyes wide open. We don't want to miss the region's magnificent landscapes. Welcome to Bryce Canyon, our first stop. Despite its name, Bryce Canyon is not a canyon, but rather a collection of natural amphitheaters. It's like a cathedral formed from rock that changes color depending on the angle of the sun. Throughout the site, we can see thousands of peaks called hoodoos that have been carved out of the rock over millions of years by erosion. The name hoodoo comes from voodoo, a word associated with bad luck and sorcery. The rock formations are also known as fairy chimneys or earth tents. According to an Aboriginal legend, the hoodoos are an ancient race of people who were turned to stone. Hikers will be overjoyed to find over 80 kilometers of trails that can be explored by foot or on horseback, from which an observant adventurer can identify over 100 species of birds and mammals, as well as a wide variety of plants. But our time is precious, so after our stop, we'll get back on the road to continue our discovery of the Southwestern United States. Here we are approaching Zion National Park, situated in a location where three geographical zones come together: the Colorado Plateaus, the Great Basin, and the Mojave Desert. Until the 1920s, the road running through this park was a dead end. 3 years of digging and blasting resulted in this narrow tunnel, which takes us an impressive 1.6 kilometers straight through the rock. The tunnel is so narrow, only one direction of traffic is allowed through at a time. Once we're out of the park, we're only 250 kilometers away from the bright lights of Las Vegas. This city is the epitome of excess. Everything is bigger, more flamboyant, more extravagant than anywhere else. In the early 20th century, Las Vegas was a sleepy little desert town. Then, in 1931, gambling was legalized in Nevada in order to fund the state's education system, and the city's first casinos were built. Las Vegas has certainly enjoyed a certain notoriety through the years. One of its monikers is Sin City. But since the 1990s, the city has been completely transformed in an effort to attract tourism and be more family-friendly. However, even the best intentions can't change the fact that gambling is the main attraction for the millions of visitors who travel to this desert metropolis each year. The infrastructure supporting the gambling industry is absolutely unbelievable. All the extravagance of the city comes to a head on Las Vegas Boulevard, also known as the Strip. This is where we'll find many of the enormous hotel casinos, each trying to outdo the others in luxury and flash. The Fremont Street Experience is an attraction built around Las Vegas's two oldest casinos, Binion's Horseshoe and the Golden Nugget. Over half a kilometer of the pedestrian street is covered with a giant vaulted screen that projects spectacular video images. Everywhere you turn, there are magnificent fountains, fireworks, concerts, and street performances, each more daring and ingenious than the next. This really is a city that never sleeps. But Las Vegas is not just a gambler's den. This city also has developed quite a reputation for its high-caliber musical performances and boxing matches. It also happens to be the marriage capital of the world, with over 200,000 weddings a year. The Mirage, this aptly named hotel in the middle of the desert, was built in 1989 at a cost of $630 million and helped kickstart a new period of development here in Las Vegas. Across the street, the Venetian epitomizes Las Vegas extravagance. Why would anyone go to Venice, Italy, when we can recreate it right here in the middle of the desert? The only thing missing is the pigeons of St. Mark's Square. And for a truly romantic experience, why not go for a ride in a Venetian gondola? And these are only a few of the delights that compose the recipe of Las Vegas's success. After a night in Las Vegas, we leave Nevada and cross back into California. Our destination today is the largest national park in the continental U.S., Death Valley National Park. It's truly a park of extremes. Not only is it the biggest, it also happens to be the driest and hottest and to be the location of the lowest point in the country. Temperatures of up to 57 degrees Celsius have been recorded in the park. Death Valley is known for the role that it played in the gold rush. The discovery of large gold deposits in the area attracted tens of thousands of prospectors from all over the world. One of the caravans coming to prospect for gold was lost in the desert for several months. When the prospectors finally found their way out of the valley, one of them baptized the area Death Valley, a name that has been striking fear into the hearts of those who seek to cross it ever since. At 85 meters below sea level, Death Valley's Badwater Basin is the lowest point in the United States. The basin is surrounded by desolate lunar landscape with no possibility of shade from the pitiless sun. Badwater Basin is actually on the site of a former lake that has dried up. At the bottom, settlers found borax deposits. The industry that sprung up around them allowed the region to prosper. Used in detergents and antiseptics, the borax was mined here until the 1930s, when the industry collapsed and the mines were closed. The heart of the borax industry was found in Furnace Creek in the center of the valley. Today, Furnace Creek is the location of the park's visitor center that recalls past days of prosperity when the mule trains crossed the region. These 20 mule trains haul tons of borax through 265 kilometers of scorching desert to the nearest railroad. After the desert moonscapes of Death Valley, we're back on the road. We're heading towards the Pacific coast to the city of Monterey. Monterey has always been a magnet for artists and writers, including the renowned John Steinbeck, author of The Grapes of Wrath. It is also the setting of another of his novels, Cannery Row. The title is a reference to the canning plants on the city's waterfront. Monterey has always depended on the sea for its economic development. At one time, there were 18 canning plants on Ocean View Avenue, and the port bustled with activity. Overfishing resulted in the disappearance of this industry, and the plants were abandoned. The area is now completely restored and has been renamed Cannery Row in homage to the Steinbeck novel. Back on the road, we make a pit stop to have a look at an especially resilient tree. The lone cypress of Pebble Beach has been withstanding the Pacific wind and storms for over 2.5 centuries. Once again, we're on board the bus for the last few kilometers between us and San Francisco. We enter Frisco, as the locals know it, at dusk. To start our visit, we'll head toward one of the most visited attractions in the city, Pier 39. Like the Santa Monica Pier, Pier 39 is home to an eclectic mix of shops, amusements, and restaurants. One of them is Bubba Gump, a chain that has over 35 restaurants all over the world. This is where we'll eat tonight. There's a wide range of choices on the menu, including, of course, their amazing succulent shrimp. And there's no shortage of paraphernalia from the movie that gave the restaurant its name. The day dawns behind the Oakland Bay Bridge over San Francisco Bay. It's already our last day on this adventure through the American West. We're getting ready to explore another legendary American city. San Francisco has had a turbulent history and has survived some real catastrophes, including one of the most destructive urban fires ever recorded and a succession of earthquakes. And yet it remains more lively and dynamic than ever. As we finish our breakfast, the streetcars start circulating up and down the steep streets of San Francisco. Established in 1776, the city experienced a population explosion during the California gold rush in the late 1840s. The thousands of prospectors who moved with their families to the West Coast were called 49ers. A statue stands in their honor in front of the San Francisco City Hall. For a panoramic view of the city, we'll climb to the top of a hill to the next stop on our tour, Alamo Square. A park surrounded by Victorian row houses with their delicate wooden details. A real treat for architecture enthusiasts. Then we'll get back on the road and have a look at the city. The view from Golden Gate Park is simply amazing. The Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz Island, the skyscrapers of the downtown area, all the San Francisco landmarks are visible in a single glance. All around us, local artists create their own version of the panorama. Golden Gate Park also contains the San Francisco Conservatory of Flowers, one of the oldest botanical gardens in the United States. Since it was founded in 1879, the magnificent Victorian Pavilion has been a destination for generations of plant lovers. But the centerpiece of the park is, of course, Golden Gate Bridge, the most famous bridge in North America. It connects San Francisco with Marin County and the cities of Northern California. When it was built in the 1930s, it was a true technological marvel. 2.7 kilometers long and 27 meters wide, its suspension towers soar 230 meters above the water. The idea to paint it bright orange wasn't only an aesthetic choice. The orange paint makes the bridge easier to see in a bay that is often shrouded in fog. From the lookout on the North Shore, we can see a different view of San Francisco, one that includes the next stop on our American adventure, Alcatraz Island. Originally named Isla de los Alcatraz, Island of Pelicans, this tiny island in San Francisco Bay occupies a special place in American prison history. A military prison at the beginning of the 20th century, it was transformed in 1933 into a high-security federal penitentiary, designed to hold the most dangerous and troublesome prisoners in the system. Its inmates included Al Capone, Mickey Cohen, and George Machine Gun Kelly. The island is a perfect location for a prisoner. Although it's just under 2 kilometers from the coast, the nasty currents, cold water, and hungry sharks prevent any escape. In addition, Alcatraz was equipped with a water heating system for the prisoners, an uncommon and luxurious feature for a prison at that time. This was to make the cold water of the bay even more unbearable. We take a self-guided tour with an audio guide. It's a perfect tool for our visit to the prison, especially because the voice that guides us through the tour belongs to a former prisoner. 29 escape attempts have been reported in the official records, and every single one of them failed. 3 inmates supposedly succeeded in escaping the prison walls in 1962, but they were never located, and it's assumed that they drowned in the bay's icy water. The following year, the prison was officially closed. The cost of operations and renovations were too high, and the authorities decided to build a new prison on the mainland. Since its closure, the prison has been made accessible to the public and receives over 1 million visitors every year. The atmosphere is heavy with the memory of the hundreds of prisoners who served their time. Alcatraz, the island of the Pelicans, will forever overlook San Francisco Bay. As the sun sets, we return to the city center for the last step of our adventure through the American West. For a strong finish to our trip, we have a surprise waiting for us. We'll go for one last tour through the city in a limousine. Over the Oakland Bay Bridge to Yerba Buena Island, giving us a spectacular view of San Francisco. This all-inclusive tour through the southwestern United States was an incredible experience. From Los Angeles to the Grand Canyon, through Death Valley to Las Vegas, and with a grand finale in San Francisco, we got to taste the true flavor of the American West. The Far West is such a fascinating and iconic region. It's going to be tough to beat. But don't put your suitcases into storage quite yet. The world is full of travel opportunities just waiting to be discovered. Come along with us on our next trip on the joy of touring.